Hi girls, it's Wednesday, September 12th, and this is going to be a shorter than yesterday video, which I'm sure many of you are thrilled about. I just had something kind of just niggling in the back of my head, and I figured I wanted to address it. This video is going to be for a certain group of women. This is not for the women in our groups who have clear-cut grounds for biblical divorce. We touched on my stance yesterday, but the fairly common across the board in the Big C Church grounds for biblical divorce are these two: unfaithfulness, unrepentant unfaithfulness, and abandonment. So if your spouse has cheated on you and is still, or it's a repetitive thing, or if your spouse has outright left you, you are free and clear to choose divorce. It doesn't mean you have to, but the path is a little bit more clear for you. This video is also not for the woman, and I say this very carefully, this is not for the woman who just isn't happy in her marriage, because I really believe that God is much more concerned with our holiness than our happiness. So if it's just that it's not a good fit, or you don't feel in love with him, that's not, for the most part, that's not what this group is for, and that's not what this video is about today. This video is going to be for the woman who's miserable in her marriage, and her husband is doing something that the Bible doesn't clearly address. When I started this process in my own marriage, it was not even on my radar that my marriage would end in divorce. That didn't even cross my mind. When I started what I'm about to lay out for you, I did it with strictly the hope that we would get some kind of help. Me and us together would get help. And my hope was that my expectation was that it had to get better than where it was. So I'm just going to share with you what my process was, and I need you to know that it's not like 3 easy steps to getting yourself out of your marriage, 3 easy steps to get divorced. That was not my intention. That's not my intention now. A couple years ago, 3 years ago or so, I went to a counselor specifically for anger. I felt like I didn't want to leave a legacy of anger to my children. I didn't want them to look back on their childhood and just remember me as an angry woman. So I remember saying to her pretty clearly that these are my circumstances, meaning difficult marriage, etc., etc., etc. They're not changing, so you need to help me change how I respond to them. A couple sessions in, on one of our sessions, she handed me a piece of paper with something called the Power Wheel of Control and Abuse. I had never seen it before. Keep in mind, I'm a psych major. Had never crossed my mind. Had never seen it. And what we did was, she said, okay, just hang in here with me. Just trust me. She said, I'm going to read each one of these. It was like this pie chart with about 12 or 14 little like pie slices. I'm going to read each description to you. And as we're going through, I want you to put a little X next to the things, to the ones that resonate with you regarding your relationship with your husband. I was skeptical. I was just kind of like humoring her, basically. By the time she had read through everything, I had checked off somewhere like 8 to 10 out of the 14 kinds of abuse. My mouth was on the floor, and I just remember her very clearly saying, "You had no idea, did you?" And I didn't. So what I want you to do, if this is you, take a look on my blog, look up the title, More Than Just a Black Eye. That is the list that she and I worked through. Okay, so I took that list home. So this is where I started to, everything changed. I had several moments like that where everything changed, but this was the day that the blinders started to fall from my eyes, and realized things were worse than I thought. I took that list home, the Power Wheel of Control and Abuse, And I spent about a week going through my journals. I've been keeping journals since college, high school actually. And never in my journals was I writing stuff out like as a record of wrongs. You know, it says in 1 Corinthians 13, love does not keep a record of wrongs. That's not what my journals were. My journals were strictly me basically begging Jesus to help me figure all this out. Help me heal us, fix this. This can't possibly be right. So I never intended to use them against my husband in any way. It was me just trying to purge myself and work it all out, figure it all out. But I went through that list and started reading 20 years of journals and just started turning corners on, pages of things. Spent about a week doing that, and then I went back through all of them and compiled a list where I put like all, I think 12 or 14 topics, different kinds of abuse. And I took the examples and plugged them in, and I ended up with 3 pages of incidents of abuse in our relationship. Now, keep in mind, my husband has never hit me, he's never raped me, so total gray. I didn't know what to do with it. In fact, once I compiled the list, there was a part of me that I actually kind of said to myself, to God, yeah, so now what? Like, nothing can be done, so great, now I just know that there's abuse in my relationship. I'm going to give you some examples so that you know that I'm not just talking like he'd snap at me if I I don't know, left the toothpaste out. That's not what we're talking about. So I'm going to give you some examples. I haven't looked at this list in a while. When I was pulling some examples out this morning, it made me sick. One of the things that I have asked God to do for me is to sort of erase the memories. I don't want to erase completely the pain because I want to remember, so that I can kind of remember the red flags and know what to look for, and in all other relationships to make them as healthy as possible. So I want to remember that part. I just don't want to remember the details anymore. So it was really difficult for me to pull all this stuff out and to start reading some of these. A couple things that I need to say as I'm about to say these. I'm not sinless, and I'm not claiming to be. This list is not a list meant to hurt my husband. It was simply that I felt that it needed to come out into the light. This list, by no means what I'm going to share with you, it's only a fraction, but even when I pulled out my journals, was not everything that's happened. Also, I know full well that there are 3 sides to every story. There's my side, my husband's side, and God's. So I was totally aware when I was pulling this together 3 years ago that things could be skewed. And yet there wouldn't have been any point for me to lie in my journal, if that makes sense. It was my full truth as I had seen it. So, to the best of my knowledge, these things actually happened. And there's going to be a little bit of swearing, so I apologize. I've been told that I'm an ass. I was told that I was a lying moron who was full of bullshit. I was told that I was insane. I was told that I was out of my mind. I was told that I made his life a living hell. I was told that my behavior would make sense if I were bipolar. I used to have to take everything out of my Target bag and tell him why I bought each item. I was forbidden from writing checks from one point. I was temporarily blocked access to all of our joint accounts for about 2 weeks behind my back. Our credit card, joint checking account, joint emergency fund. I was on the receiving end of the silent treatment once for 6 days. I was accused of taking too much advice from my counselors. One time, this was a little bit earlier on, but he unplugged the clothes dryer without telling me because he said I wasn't using it the right way. I was blamed for why he drank. I was blamed for him having to hide his drinking. I was told that he drank as a barometer of our relationship. The first time that I told him that I thought I should tell the kids about his drinking before I went on a missions trip, he told me that I had brought Satan into our family. He didn't agree that the kids should observe the Sabbath with me because he wanted them to be able to do chores on Sunday, so he told me to pick a day during the week when the kids were at school so they wouldn't see me observing the Sabbath. Keep in mind, he's a Christian. I was told that I wasn't allowed to give money to vagrants. I wasn't allowed to pay bills. I was told in the grocery store he could put whatever he wanted in the cart, but I had to ask first, and he was allowed to tell me no, but I couldn't do the same for him. One time my phone was dying, and it was I'd had it for a couple of years, it was time for me to get a new one. And he told me that I needed to take my phone with me when I would sit outside in case he called me, even telling me that he wouldn't get me a new phone if I didn't agree to carry it with me and on me at all times. I used to be told that he would want me to tell him when I thought I was going to be home, and if I were going to be home more than 15 minutes late or early, I had to call ahead of time. And this was one of the moments that changed everything for me. When I was absolutely convinced that it was time for me to tell the kids about his drinking, he told me that he would take me down beyond all recognition, and the kids would be gobbled up in the crossfire. Okay, so those are some examples of emotional, scriptural, financial abuse, humiliation, manipulation, control. Okay? So I took the expanded list, the 3-page list, and I showed this list to my mentor and to my best friend, and they both told me that it needed to be shown to a counselor, and it needed to be shown to a couple at church that people were trying to set us up with to start having like a couples mentor relationship. So it was one of the scariest things I've ever done. But when the 4 of us met for dinner, this new couple that was going to mentor us, and my husband and I, when we met for dinner, I brought this list with me, and I hadn't told my husband ahead of time. He didn't even know that I was working on this list. I handed a copy to all 3 of them. I said all the disclaimers that I had just said to you guys before I read them off. And I looked at them and I said, I can't do this anymore. This needs to stop. And I am begging you to help me and to help us. They were all shocked by the list, especially my husband. And that began 15 months of intense mentoring and counseling and scrutiny and involvement of our church leadership. So basically, I prayed a ton. I collected evidence. I got as much wise counsel as I could, and I kept asking for help until I was heard. So basically, I just want to say, if that's where you are, if you have things like what I just listed off happening to you, I'm not saying automatically get out of there, get a divorce. I am saying it's wrong. I don't believe it's what God wants for you in your marriage, and you need to ask for help until you get it. Now, in the meantime being until things change in your marriage, or until you feel God releases you from your marriage, I want to just give you 2 suggestions. 1, keep doing what you can do to work on your marriage. You want your head held high through this whole thing. So keep reading marriage books. Pray for your marriage. Pray for your husband. Ask someone else to pray that you really trust to pray for your marriage and for your husband. If you're not in a small group women's Bible study, get in one. Stay in the Word. Get into some kind of 12-step recovery group if possible. And if possible, get into counseling, even if it's just for yourself. You can go to marriage counseling just for you. The second thing I would say is do what you can do to stay emotionally, spiritually, and physically healthy. Because during that time in my life, I was depressed, anxious, had heart palpitations, migraines started up again, didn't sleep well. It affects every area of your life, as you well know. So some things you can do. You can journal. Make sure you're spending some time with God every day. Make sure you're not isolated. Being in an abusive situation, first of all, the partner sometimes wants to keep you isolated so that the truth doesn't get out. But you can feel so crazy is really the only word I can think to say. So make sure that you are talking to people face to face. Spend time with a trusted friend at least once a week if you can. Keep going to church, and if you're not in a church, get in a church. Eat well. There are things you can do for your health. Try to get enough sleep. Try to exercise even a little bit each day. Take an antidepressant if you and your doctor feel that would benefit you. I was on antidepressant for probably about 9 months. It's one of those things that you never know for sure if it actually works, but I found one that there was no side effects, so it was just one other tool that I was using to try to do everything I could to stay as emotionally healthy as I could. Okay, so where does this leave all of us? And I'm realizing that this is as long as yesterday's. Sorry. Jesus sees your circumstance, and he knows that you're hurting and confused. I know that he saw me laying on my bathroom floor sobbing every single time. I know that he saw it. God is not a God of disorder. He is a God of peace. He is alive and active, and he wants to help you. If what you've been doing all along isn't working, if you're getting certain kinds of help, but everything is staying exactly the same, except that maybe you're feeling worse, it's time to try something new. And it's going to take strength and courage, but I believe that God will give that to you, because if what you're living in is what I just described, I'm not trying to tell you what to do, but I am saying I fully believe that's not what God wants for you or for your husband. I fully believe that God is more concerned with our holiness than our happiness, but I also believe he doesn't want you surrounded by evil, and he doesn't want you to be the brunt of someone else's sinful choices over and over again. Help is available, so keep asking until you get it. Okay, bye ladies.